So thank you for coming tonight and spending a little bit of your time with me to hear me share some thoughts and ideas with you. I'm fortunate because I get to travel around the world and I speak in many different locations about my favorite topic in the world, and that's privately held business ownership. But I would be remiss to not tell you how meaningful it is for me to be here. This is my first time to Israel. And as I was telling a small group before that we got together, I was supposed to be here on my 13th birthday with my grandmother. And that got cancer, she got ill and never happened. But, I have so many friends who've been here before, and they tell you when you come to Israel, it's more than a visit. And I'm overwhelmed by what that actually really means. I'm very active back in Colorado, where I'm from. I'm originally from New York, lived in San Francisco, now live in Colorado. And I am soon to be the president of our JCC back there. And it's the largest JCC built for a community of our size. And I almost feel like it would have been wrong for me to take over the presidency without being here, right? So I feel I'm a little more credentialed now. So anyway, thanks for having me here. This is very meaningful for us. I'm very proud of Eric Hertz for bringing TAB to Israel, and I'm excited to see what happens as we expand throughout. So today, I'm going to talk about the timeless principles of exceptional businesses. We just celebrated we're on our 27th year, but when we turned 25, someone told you you're supposed to do something about that. And I was like, well, the only people who really care that we turn 25 is maybe us. So if you're going to do something, let's do something meaningful. Let's do something valuable. And let's share something that we learned. So what we did is we compiled a book of stories and experiences from our members, from our facilitators from around the world, and that said, if we knew then what we know now, what would we do differently in order to accelerate our growth, avoid some of the mistakes? And what we have here is a compilation of those stories. Since I only know how to read Hebrew and don't understand Hebrew, I don't know if Eric told you he has a book for everybody, okay? So at the end of the meeting, there's a book for those. Hopefully we have enough. If not, you let us know, we'll get you a copy of it. So I'm going to start by sharing with you 7 or 8 of the principles. You all have a folder, yeah? In that folder, there's a worksheet, not a worksheet, just something to take notes on should you want to. You don't feel that you have to. But it's kind of to help you guide you through some of the principles that I'm going to talk about. And hopefully this is not a workshop, so I'm not going to stop and take questions in the middle of it. I'm going to be talking, but I hope that today I could be a catalyst of thought. I could help you think about a few things differently. That you're going to go back to your company, that you're going to go back to your business, you're going to go back to a team in which you work on, and maybe brainstorm a little bit about some of the things that I'm talking about today. All right? Now, the other thing is I'm a very insecure person. So when I ask a question, or I would appreciate some feedback because it helps me feel like, I shouldn't feel like really bad about myself, if that's okay. So can you guys help me a little bit with that? Sure. Very dear. Okay. So, like I said, you have the book. So let's get into it right off the bat. All right. So the first thing I want to ask everyone in this room, raise your hand if you're a business owner. Okay. Raise your hand if you are not a business owner yet but are looking to go into business. Okay. Raise your hand if you work for a company and are just interested in learning some principles and you maybe lead some teams and all that. Okay, fantastic. So we got the spread. So everything I'm going to talk about today is relevant to all those groups I just talked about. But if you own a business, or you plan on owning a business, listen closely. Because this isn't Jason Zickerman's wisdom. This is the wisdom of a lot of really smart people around the world who've made a ton of mistakes and wishes that you don't make the same mistakes or follow suit or take advantage of some of the successes. So my first question to all of you is, what is your red rose? And since you have no idea what I'm talking about, let me explain that first. What is your differentiator? How do people know you or think of you before they might think of one of your competitors? So let me tell you a little story. There was a woman living in the state of Florida in the U.S., okay? And she realized in her house that she had palmetto bugs. Do you know what a palmetto bug is? No? All right. So it's like a really pretty name for like a huge cockroach-looking bug. It is disgusting. I mean, literally creepy, right? So she has these palmetto bugs in her house, and she calls up an exterminator to get rid of the bugs. Now, back then it was the Yellow Pages, now it would be Google or something like that. But she looks them up, she finds an exterminator. The exterminator comes on time, does a nice job, fair price, you know, and does what they have to do and leaves. So, very happy customer. 3 or 4 months later, she notices that the palmetto bugs are back. As you all know, the bugs don't go away forever, so they came back. She says, oh, gosh, they're back. I better call an exterminator. She forgot who she actually called. So she goes back and searches for another exterminator, finds another exterminator. They come just when they said they were supposed to, did the job very professionally, but this time, leaves a fair price, receipt, all that, the whole 9 yards. But this time, as she went back into the kitchen, after the exterminator left, there was a red rose on the counter with a handwritten note. And the note said, "Dear Madam, I'm so sorry that you needed our services, and I certainly hope you don't need us any time in the future. But if you do, I do hope you think of us and will provide the best service possible." Now, everyone raise your hand if you've received a thank you note by your exterminator. No? Is there a question in anyone's mind right now who this woman is going to think of next time she needs an exterminator? Do you think that this woman has told that story about that exterminator, about the red rose and a handwritten note to anybody who would listen? I mean, for crying out loud, I'm up here writing a story about it, and I'm telling a group in Israel about it. I mean, that's amazing. So my question to each of you, as you think about your business, as you think about the service, what is your red rose? And I want to point out that your red rose does not have to be this big thing. It just has to be memorable in a positive way. So what is your red rose? How are you going to do something different to make people think of you before they think of someone else? Now, when you're trying to think about what your red rose is, does anyone in here have a red rose? Yeah? Well, would you mind sharing it?
Mine is strategic thinking along with very professional, high-level tactical delivery.
Excellent, excellent. Anyone have anything that they'd like to share about what their red rose, what makes you memorable? No? All right, so let's think about, was that a hand raise? Yeah, tell me.
Randomly send books to my customers, my
Yeah.
clients, and things that will help.
That's great. Yeah, they're being thought about, aren't they? It's really neat. Now, for those of us sitting in the room saying, all right, I don't have a red rose, but I'd like one. What might you do to start thinking about developing? Well, the first one is know your competitors. Know your industry. Okay? So first you got to ask yourself, do I know my competitors? Do I know my industry that I'm in? And if you do, fantastic. If you don't, okay, let me just recommend you should start. And what you need to be doing then, and how do you get to know your competitors? Who knows what a mystery shopper is? Anyone? Yeah? Great. One hand in the back. A mystery shopper is when you call up pretending to be a customer and in asking questions and see how they're interacting with you. What do they offer? So you understand what that service being offered is.
Spying.
What's that?
Spying.
Spying. Okay, yeah, in a good way, right? But it's getting your competitive advantage. But it's called a mystery shopper. But understanding now, you also understand that certain industries have certain blind spots, right? Some of us, you just know that in your business, your industry, as a rule, we're not very good at this or we're not very good at that. That's another way to make yourself stand out compared to the others in your space. But go find out what your competitors are doing and do one thing specifically different than them. The other way to do it is ask your competitors for referrals. And then speak to them and say, what do you like about these guys? What makes them so good? If anything, what don't you like about them? What should I be aware of if I'm going to use them? So you understand what's different. Does that make sense to everybody? It'll really help you understand how to potentially differentiate yourself from the marketplace. And then help yourself identify that signature element that you want to be different about yourself that might make you memorable. One of our members, his name is Tim Allman. All right, he writes home loans. Okay, now this gentleman happens to reside in the States. And he came to us and he's sitting there saying, you know, business is slow. He's kind of getting beaten out by the others, or it's been commoditized, a lot of people in his space. So we decided, we talked about, what are you going to do different? How are you going to compete? How are you going to be memorable compared to everyone else? So what he decided to do is make home visits. He would literally go to your house, help you write your loan. Now, for anyone who's been through the mortgage process or getting a loan, you either fit in their criteria or you don't. You either get the money or you don't. But what he did, he decided to make home visits. Because he felt if he sat at your kitchen table, pet your dogs, told you how cute your kids are, it would create a better relationship with them, and he would write more loans. Well, it worked. Because they tracked that stuff, and he, within 6 months' time, was outpacing the amount of loans per visit that he was writing. So he made a difference in what he did. A small taste, but the fact is he came to your house and made that notion. Now, have any of you seen the movie, came out years ago, very funny, called City Slickers? You know that movie? Billy Crystal, right? So there was the old cowboy. His name was Curly. Yeah. Well, did you know Curly was one of the best coaches there were? No?
None of you get it. Do you know what the secret of life is?
No, what?
This.
Your finger?
One thing. Just one thing. You stick to that and everything else don't mean.
That's great, but what's the one thing?
That's what you gotta figure out.
So as you think about your business, I'd like you to think about what is your one thing. And remember, it doesn't have to be big. It just has to be memorable. Something that people are going to talk about you or think about you in a positive way. So when we spoke to all of our members and we facilitated, we asked them, what's some of the best advice you could give someone? Is to differentiate yourself. Stand out. But it's not something that happens by accident. This is an active step. This is a great exercise for you to go back to your company. Bring your people together and say, what is our one thing? You'll find it to be a fun exercise. And if you don't have a lot of employees, bring people who know you, that can maybe identify something that they know about you that can make a difference. But develop your red rose. Now, the next thing that folks told us that I thought was really interesting was discovering your why. Discovering your why. When people talk to someone about their business, the first, second, third, and 10th thing you hear out of their mouth is what they do and how they do it. Do you agree with that, folks? Yeah. But the reality is, what we think is super important for you is to identify why you do it. Now, let me ask you a couple things. do you think this would be a good thing if you had it as a business owner? If you could find customers who are indifferent to cost, even quality or convenience, that would be pretty darn good, wouldn't it? And if you could find folks who repeatedly buy from you, have that loyalty to you, that's kind of a goal of ours as a business owner, isn't it? And who voluntarily rave about you to their friends and to their colleagues or to anyone in earshot about who you are, what you do in service, and telling them that they should do business with you. Are these three things kind of the goal of all of us right now? Right? So if you had this is what we would call a raving fan. Every one of us wants raving fans for our business. That's how we're going to grow our business better than anything else we could do. So the question that I have to ask each of you is, how do you know who your raving fans are? Do you have a way of knowing that? And then the more uncomfortable question I have to ask each and every one of you is, do you know who your detractors are? So you have your raving fans. You want to know who they are and how many you have. But do you know who your detractors are? Who are not saying good things about you? Well, the good news is a very simple way to find that out. And the way we find that out is by asking one very simple question. Who's heard of the Net Promoter Score in here? 1, 2, 3. Raise it up high so I can see. Okay, good. It's a great program, all right? Great, thanks. And it was developed by Fred Reichheld from Bain & Company. But it asks one simple question. It says, on a scale of 0 to 10, what is the likelihood that you would recommend our company to a friend or colleague? How many in this room asked that question? A couple of people. Great. Assuming you knew that question, why do you think people don't ask that question? What's that? They're afraid of the answer. They don't want to know the answer. Because it's a scary answer, right?
But to ask for recommendation, for example, in LinkedIn or something like that, it's the same, no?
To some degree it is. There's a lot of similarity to it. But if you ask this question of 0 to 10, where you are, you're going to find out who your raving fan is or who your detractors are. And let me tell you how it works, all right? So if you ask this question, you guys can all hear me well right there, right? Okay. If you ask this question, you get a 9 or 10, they're raving fans. That is who is a raving fan. If they tell you 7 or 8, they're neutral, they're passive. They're not hurting you, they're not helping you, they're kind of neutral, all right? But the problem is, they're one mistake away from becoming a detractor. But the bad thing is if they say 0 to 6, they are a detractor. And what I mean by detractor, so I'm very clear, is they are hurting your business. A little or a lot. Okay? Now the way you figure out your Net Promoter Score is you take the percentage of folks who gave you a 9 or 10 and subtract the percentage of your customers who gave you a 0 to 6. That'll give you your Net Promoter Score. Okay? Now, the question I need to ask each of you is, what happens if you have a negative Net Promoter Score? Right? What happens if that number is not where you want it to be and you have far more detractors than you care to admit? Well, the current leader right now in this day and age of folks who are helping build raving fans is a gentleman by the name of Simon Sinek. Anyone hear of Simon Sinek? Okay. Great book. If you haven't read it, get it. It's a quick read, but it really helps you understand the why. Okay. Now, if you're like me with an attention of a hummingbird, and maybe a quick video might be helpful. There's a YouTube video for like 15-20 minutes. We'll sum up a good portion of it right online. It's worth to watch. Now, the father of modern day philosophy, his name is Rene Descartes. You may have heard him, but you definitely probably heard what he's famous, the saying he's famous for. I think, therefore I am. Right. Now, modern day neuroscience says, yeah, I know Rene Descartes said that, but I actually don't believe that's really right. They say, I don't believe we are thinking people who feel, but rather we're feeling people who think. And what that really means is we buy emotionally. We make those decisions emotionally. We justify it intellectually. Who would agree with that statement? Right? And that's an important thing. So if you really start thinking about is what your service, your product, what your offer is, does it help people emotionally engage or not? Now, the reality is that's the first thing you need to embrace is that we are feeling people who justify emotion intellectually. Just ask my wife. I made the stupidest purchases in the world, and somehow I'll come home with a great explanation of why I needed that or we needed that. So, we need to help figure out the why. Now, you guys don't have this company here, but it's around the world. Anyone know why this is evolving the way the world moves? Everyone heard of Uber? Notice there's not a thing in there. Now, their whole mantra here is that they're helping people get things more conveniently. You know, not taxi cab service or anything like that, but now they have Uber Bike, Uber Ski, Uber Food. They're just making the world a more convenient place. All right? Evolving the way the world moves. Their why. Who knows this why? Anyone ever see this or know this? We can improve people's lives through business. Does anyone know the company Tom's Shoes? Yeah? No? Okay. So what's neat about these guys is that for every pair of sneakers or shoes that you buy from them, they're going to donate a pair of shoes or sneakers or whatever they are to the needy. Now, do you think that's a powerful why? Do you think that helps people want to buy from them? Does for me. I don't even like their shoes and I buy them because of it. Right? It's an amazing why. Now, you might be sitting here right now saying, well, all right, but I don't have this big, grand why. That's okay. It doesn't have to be. But here's what I know. Because I speak to business owners all the time. You love your company. You may love your employees. You may really care about your customers. You may love that you're in a community and helping build an economic base. There's something about what you do and why you do it that is a good story. And what you need to figure out is what is your why? Because people want to understand that. Once they know why you do it, then you can fill in the what and the how you do it. But people want to understand what is your why. Do you guys know what your why is? Have you ever stopped to think about it? Because if you do, and you figure out how it's a good why, the next thing I want you to do is take that why and turn them into stories. All right? Because people remember stories, don't they? And the question that I need to ask all of you is, first of all, do you have a story? Not a what and a how only, but a why. Do you have multiple stories? And then the next thing I want to ask each of you is, how often is it told? That's a really simple benchmark for each and every one about it in this room, is how often are you telling your story to someone who might be interested in it? And if you're not the one who's supposed to be telling the story, because that's not your role, but find out who the people are in your company, the salespeople, the whatever team it is, and say, how often are you telling the story? The greatest storyteller in the world is Pixar films, right? Everyone knows Pixar films. Who doesn't love Monsters, Inc.? It's not about the technology. What it's about is the fact that they can tell a story that you can become emotionally attached to. Your story can be as simple as, you know what? I want to be able to provide for my family and send my kids to college and university, and I want to have a healthy, whatever it might be. But to know that is important. My father literally goes around 4 other dry cleaners in New York because there's one dry cleaner who told him that his grandchildren are back in Korea and all he was doing is sends money back there and he's going back twice a year to visit them and he can't wait. And that's why he's in this business and working so hard. So my father doesn't care about anything else because he's emotionally attached to what this individual's plighted, right? So what is your story? And tell it. The next thing that I'd like to talk to you about is brand matters. Brand matters. When we wrote the book, we did a bunch of research. And we said if you were to run your business again, is there a particular area, when we came to the marketing area, that you would do differently? Where would you spend your energy and efforts? And the results came back to us pretty surprisingly. This may or may not be surprising to you. But if you notice, brand building is almost 50% more than the advertising and campaigns. Now, you don't have to raise your hand per se, but I bet you there's a bunch of us in here who probably thought brand building was advertising and campaigns, right? PR campaigns. But I'd like to change the way you might possibly think about this, okay? Jeff Bezos from Amazon knows a little bit about branding, don't you think? He says that your brand is formed primarily not by what your company says about itself, but what your company does. Or more simply put, your brand is what people are saying about you when you're not in the room. Who agrees with that statement? Yeah. I mean, there really is no better definition of what your brand is than what people are saying about you when you're not in the room. And if it's not good, well, that's a problem. But if it is, you can't get PR better than that. So the question that everyone always asks, and I see there always being a conversation, is does having a strong brand really have any real value? And I will tell you that it's unequivocally yes. Because when you do have a strong brand, it will pre-sell your product or service. 100%. Okay? But just as importantly, when you have a strong brand, customers are willing to pay more for yours versus somebody else's. Because they know what it stands for. They know what the service is. And your brand speaks to that. Customer loyalty. When your brand is there, how many of you are like Apple people or Samsung people or some sort of brand loyalty, right? That's what you do. You just go that route because you just know what it means when you're there. So the power of a strong brand absolutely has value. About a year ago, I think this is now, the Wall Street Journal published an article about profitability in the smartphone industry. Raise your hand if you have a smartphone. Raise your hand if you actually carry 2 smartphones. All right, I want to speak to each of you after class because there's nothing good about that. Nothing, okay? All right. So what they talked about was, so Apple and all the other companies in this, what percentage of the profit do you think that Apple had in the smartphone business? Anyone? Take a guess.
50%.
50%?
80%.
80%? Higher.
70.
Higher. 92%. Samsung had the other 8%. That means everyone else is losing. So does brand have value? Absolutely. But let's help rethink what brand might mean. And of course, the customers are going to purchase more products and services from you, assuming you're not just a one type of product, type of organization. Charles Revson from Revlon Cosmetics. He says, in the factory, we make cosmetics. In the department store, we sell hope. Think about that. Right? It's not what you do, it's how people on the other end of it receive it. All right? The people who buy the Revlon products, they feel good about themselves. Not the what, the how. So very often when we talk about what we do, and we're talking about the features, right? Not the benefits. Do you want to know when you're buying something what the features are or what the benefit to you is going to be? Now that may sound, everyone knows the difference between features and benefits, yes? Okay? So think about it right now. When you look at your marketing material, when you think about the conversations you're having about your company, are you sharing more about the features than you are the benefits, the value? I would venture to say that most of us are. And that's not why they're buying. Theodore Levitt from Harvard Business School. He says, people don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill. What they want is a 1/4-inch hole. It's a great statement, right? What is the result that they're looking for? What is the end thing they want? But yet we start talking to them about all this other stuff that's not what is important to them. Think about yourself right now. Go back to your office, to your company, bring your people together and say, what are we saying? What are we discussing? Are we talking about features or benefits? Or are we talking about the value in which we want people to get from us? Now, a brand is a promise, is it not? When you think about the great brands or your own brand, do you think that that brand should stand for something or is a promise to folks? Yeah? Okay? So Matar 10 from Coca-Cola says, well, if a brand is a promise, then a great brand is a promise kept. When you think about yourself and your service, your company, how many of you are keeping your promise? You don't have to raise your hand, right?
Coca-Cola doesn't.
What's that?
Coca-Cola doesn't.
Yeah, maybe they don't.
Maybe they do.
Maybe they do. Let's not debate whether Coca-Cola, I think they're doing all right though, regardless. Right? But the fact is, I'm talking about you and your individual companies. Do you keep your promises? Does it mean something? What is your promise? And I think that's another great question to ask yourself. What do we want to stand for? Who knows the TV show Seinfeld? Yeah? I'm a Seinfeld junkie. I mean, when I all wound up and high strung, I go home and I put on some Seinfeld and grab my kids and I said, let's just sit down and watch it. Great example here.
Oh, I'm sorry, we have no midsize available at the moment.
I don't understand. I made a reservation. Do you have my reservation?
Yes, we do. Unfortunately, we ran out of cars.
But the reservation keeps the car here. That's why you have the reservation.
I know why we have reservations.
I don't think you do. If you did, I'd have a car. See, you know how to take the reservation, you just don't know how to hold a reservation. And that's really the most important part of the reservation, the holding. Anybody can just take it.
What is your promise? What is your brand promise? And are you keeping it? And if you don't have a brand promise, go figure that one out too. And then commit to making a difference that everyone knows you for that. This would be one of the big things that they would do differently. So, from brand building tips here, start with the value that you offer. Okay? Go back and think about, look at your material, look about your sales pitch and all that, and see if you are a value-based message in general. That's going to be the first thing that you folks need to do. Identify what that differentiator is for yourself. And then think about the words that you want to own. That when you think about your company, that you also want to be synonymous with those words, right? Everyone knows the game. You say Volvo, it means save, right? So like the alternative board, our organization, we want to be known, and we are in other parts of the world, for profitability, growth, productivity, strategic. So when we look at all of our messaging, this is what is consistently being communicated. So what words do you want to be known for when people talk about you? Make a brand promise, identify your stories, and communicate those stories as often as you can. One simple benchmark for all of you. Tell that story. And then exceed your brand promise. Now that may sound really cliche, right? Oh, just exceed your promise, you know that. But so many of us don't do that. You know, exceeding someone's expectations is not doing the right thing is doing something better than the right thing, right? Something goes wrong and you make it right, it's good. But if you make it right by going above and beyond, that's memorable. This is what our members from around the world would do differently now, if they could, as they drive and build their business. Next area that was really important that folks identified was culture. Raise your hand if you believe that your company has a definitive culture in it. Okay. Well, I'll argue that each and every one of us and one of you has a definitive culture in your organization. The question that you need to ask yourself is the culture that you have in your organization one by accident or on purpose? Was it intentional or did it just evolve to where it is? Now, what people don't realize is that no matter what you're doing, these folks are watching here. As a leader of the company, as a leader of the division, you're setting the tone in that organization as to how you want people to behave, communicate, and respond to each other. You all agree with that? So when we talk to all of our business owners, one of the things that we heard is they would like to wish they have set a different tone, a different message. Because when you have a bad culture, it's really hard to change it. And a bad culture could be corrosive and destructive. But a great culture can make you achieve some great things. Everyone knows Gandhi.
Sure.
Okay. I'll tell you a quick story. Many years ago, when you had the ability to meet Gandhi, this woman takes her son to meet him. And they finally get their appointment to sit down with Gandhi. They sit down in front of Gandhi. And Gandhi says, "Mother, what can I do for you?" And the mother says, "Father, Babu, please tell my son he needs to start taking better care of himself. He needs to start eating better food and less sugar, because he's not going to grow up to be a strong boy." Gandhi sat there for a few moments, looked at the mother, looked at the son. He said, "Mother, please come back in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, I'd like to talk to your son." So you don't argue with Gandhi, right? You just do what he says. So she grabs her son's hand and kind of walks out away from Gandhi. A little bit perplexed why, not understanding what happened. 2 weeks later goes by. She meets with Gandhi again. They sit down in front of Gandhi. And Gandhi says to the son, says, "Son, I've been thinking. Your mother is absolutely correct. You need to start taking better care of yourself, eating less sugar. We want you to be a strong boy. Help the family, help your community. You can't do that if you're not healthy." The young boy says, "Yes, Father, I will." Mother gets up. They start walking away, and she turns back to Gandhi and says, "But Father, why didn't you just tell him that 2 weeks ago?" And Gandhi looked at the mother and says, "Mother, 2 weeks ago, I too was eating a lot of sugar." The point being is that leadership matters. You can't be a hypocrite about how you want the company to run if you cannot set the tone that you want within the organization. So again, if they were for those of us who are starting, I spoke to some with young companies in here, start out on the right foot. Be that. Set the culture and the tone you want. Every one of us has a culture, but is it the culture that you want? Because if it's not, the only one to blame is this individual here. Make a difference. Now this area was probably one of the most important things, or the most provocative areas that came out of the book. And it's stop working below your pay grade. How many of us in this room think sometimes they're doing, a lot of times, they're doing things way beneath their pay grade? You know what I mean by that? It's just not high value time. It's huge. It's relevant. And one of the things we work on with all of our members is putting them in the position where they're working on the most important things. Now let me ask a question. What do you think we have control over? Time, money, or people? Help me out. All of them? Not all of them. Time. You can influence all of them, yes. But the only one that you have control over is your time. You can influence people, but you can't control people. You can't make people do anything that they don't want to do or willing to do. You can't control money coming in. You maybe control a little bit going out. But if we could all control money coming in, this business whole thing would be great, wouldn't it? But time is within your control. And the most precious commodity of any privately held business owner, particularly a small, medium-sized business owner, is our time. You all agree with that? Anyone feel like they have way more time than they need? Probably not. So we sit down, we were talking to a tab member, and in our meeting, we always talk about how are you using your time. And we want people to be more effective with it. So I'd like you to ask yourself, how much is an hour of your time worth? Is it $100, $200, $300? I don't know. But think about it. You don't have to tell it out loud. Because then I want you to multiply that by all the time you're spending beneath your pay grade, which means your high value work. We were sitting with a member, and we had this conversation at a board, and he said he's worth $300 an hour. And he's an attorney. Let's just say he's worth that. That's what he gets. So he's telling us all about this. We're having a good conversation. Not even 30, 40 minutes later in the meeting, he tells us all that he's going to pick someone up at the airport and drive back. And someone said, well, how long is that going to take you? He said, 4 hours. That's a $1,200 cab ride. So we kind of gave it to him a little bit. And he decided to send a card, nice card, very impressive. Card, yes sir, and gets in $120. He then said, now go back to your office and work on what is value. He closed a major client. Now, that could have been coincidental, but he was in those high value areas. So what do you need us to do? And how do we help? And how would you change this for yourself? Well, the first thing we want you to do is identify your platinum activities. Your platinum activities are the activities that you should be doing in your business because it has the biggest possibility of changing the direction of your organization. All right? You know what those are for yourself. Think about the things now that are really high value for you and the company. The things that you're doing now that you want to continue doing. The things that you should be doing more of, but you just don't get around to it as often. The things that you're not doing that you wish you were doing. And just write it down. Don't do anything with it. Just put down those areas that you would like to get to or you really feel you should be doing. Platinum activities. Make sense? Now the next thing we want you to do, and this is as important as anything else that we're going to do it, is I want you to develop your to-don't list. Not your to-do list, your to-don't list. Okay? All the things. Now, this is a hard thing because a lot of us are doing a lot of things we should not be doing. Would you guys agree with that? Okay? So the way you do this is take a piece of paper, stick it to your desk, and every time you're doing something that you feel is beneath the pay grade or not a platinum activity, write it down. Don't worry about what you do with it. Just do it for a month. Get it, take a look at it. What you're going to see very clearly jump off the page at you is all the things that you're really doing that has no benefit of moving your company forward. Now, as a small, medium-sized business owner, you're probably sitting there saying, geez, I don't get the choice to do everything I want to do. That's not a luxury that I have, and I get that. But at least some of that you will. You'll be able to look at some of those activities and say, well, why isn't so-and-so doing it? Why, do you have to hire someone, fire someone, retrain somebody to do some of the things that you're doing? Because many of us are doing these low benefit activities because we always have, right? We haven't delegated them. But this will be incredibly powerful when you look at what you need to do. Then the next step to this whole process that makes this really work is identify your prime time. Your prime time. And what that means is the time of week or day that you're going to focus purely on your platinum activities. Okay? Now again, people are sitting there going, my gosh, I don't have a day that I can just put on Platinum Activities. I get it. Just start small. Give yourself one day of the week that from X time to X time, all you're going to do is Platinum Activities. Okay? Start the practice. It'll make a huge difference in your business. Okay? Don't answer emails. Don't have your open door policy. I was one of those guys, I was very proud of it. I have an open door policy. Anytime you need to talk to me, just come on in. But that doesn't allow you to have creative thought. But when is your best time for you to do your Platinum Activities? I'm a morning person, okay? So all my Platinum Activities has to happen in the morning, because by noon I'm thoroughly aggravated with something, right? So if I need to have my attention, my focus, creativity, I want that early in the morning. Make sense to everybody? Because how many of us right now are working below our pay grade a good portion of the time? We don't have to be. We could change that. That is within your control. And this will make a big difference in your business. The next thing I want to talk to you is by the numbers. Everyone know what a KPI is, a key performance indicator, right? All right, good. So a key performance indicator are the numbers within your business that really tell you how well you're doing or not doing as an organization. Charles Schwab, CEO of Bethlehem Steel, okay? Many people think Charles Schwab, the financial advisor company, but that's not what we're talking about. Bethlehem Steel. He had many factories building steel. And he had this one factory that just wasn't producing the numbers it needs to do. And they did everything they could, incentives, fired people, hired people, stick, everything they could possibly think of, and they couldn't get this one factory to improve. So one day, the foreman walks through the plant and says, how many pallets have you done today? And the guy said, we did 6, sir. He said, 6, great. Takes a big piece of chalk, writes 6 right on the ground. The night shift comes in. They go, what is this? Oh, the day shift did 6 pallets. The next day the day shift comes in, 6 was crossed out and 7 was on the ground. The night shift walks in and go, 7, game on. The next day it was 10. With one day, by just putting a simple number out there, the plant actually almost doubled its production. The power of a KPI, a key performance indicator, so people know what to shoot for, what's good, what's not good, is incredibly important. They help tell you the story about what's going well, what's not going well. Now there's 2 types of key performance indicators. It's the lagging indicator and the leading indicator. You guys know the difference between those two? All right? Let me just be real quick. A lagging indicator means it's a number. It tells you how well you did, but there's nothing you can do about it at that point, right? End of the month, customers, it's our lagging indicator. That's how many customers we have. But a leading indicator, which is a bit better, would be something like suspects, right? Because if you have a certain amount of suspects and you don't think it's enough, then you could do more marketing or whatever it might be. If your suspects haven't turned into prospects, well, maybe we need to adjust the selling process to convert them into a better direction. You could take action to change the direction of where we're going. That makes sense to everybody? So what I want each of you to think about is, have you identified your key performance indicators in your organization? And start small. You don't have to go big in general. And the key, very important part of this thing is you have to have good data on this, right? Because obviously if you're making bad decisions, good decisions on bad data, you know what happens. But what are the few numbers? Don't be more than 5. 1 to 2 is fine. That you want to be able to track and communicate to the others around you so you know how well you're doing. If you do that, your eye is on the prize. Very often what happens is we get really busy, we get focused on the things that we like, the shiny penny syndrome. I have ADD, so that I have very bad ADD, shiny penny syndrome, right? But where do you want to keep the focus of yourself, your team, and your company? KPIs. In your folder, there's a nice handout that Eric provided you that talks about KPIs. It'll help you think through what might be a good KPI for your business. Take a look at that, okay? It'll be helpful. And then the last thing that I want to share with you is exiting your business. The one thing I'll tell you for sure, and this is going to be truly eye-opening for you, is that you're going to exit your business one way or another. So let's hope that we exit the right way and that we're able to benefit from the hard work that we did over the years. You mean you got it, yes. One or the other, right? Now, a big part of the challenge is, most of us think, well, I'm going to run my business till I get tired. And then when I'm tired, I'll find a buyer. They'll buy the business. I'll go enjoy my retirement. But there's a problem with that, okay? First of all, baby boomers are outnumbering those who are able to buy a business by a significant rate. And those who are ready to buy a business at this age, many of them don't have that much money. They weren't as, let's say, frugal as our previous generations. So it's not that easy. The average business takes 2 years to sell. 18 months to 2 years. So this is not a 90-day, oh, I'm exhausted, let's get out of this thing. It doesn't work that way unless you're ready to take a fire sale on your business. But exiting the business is one of the greatest joys, potentially, that a business owner can have. That they're able to cash out from all that hard work. But very often, you talk to a business owner, they say, my business is me, and I'm my business. There's no difference, right? For those of us who own business, there's no separating us from our business itself. So how many of us do you think feel that our business might be worth a bit more than it is to the buyer? A lot of us, right? Because that's our baby. Heart, sweat, and tears. We put all that into it. Right? So it's very important to really understand what that business is worth. Now, Bo Burlingame, who's the editor-at-large for Inc. magazine, wrote a great book called Finishing Big. And he was spoke at our conference not too long ago. And he shared with us some of the key things for a successful exit after doing an enormous amount of research. The keys that are most important to a business owner, and for those starting out business, you need to think about exiting as you build your business. That's probably one of the best rules you could possibly have. But owners feel that they've been treated fairly during that exit process and feel like they've been well compensated. That's obviously a primary goal of someone who sells their business. They're at peace with their employees, meaning that they feel that they've been able to do the right thing by the people who helped them get to where they are. And I think this was a surprise to a lot of employees when I talk about it, but that's really important, that you could do the right thing by folks and give them what they deserve. And that they discovered a new sense of purpose for once they retire. Everyone understand what I mean by that, right? You've been doing your business 30 plus years, 5, 6, 7 days a week. You cannot just sell it and not know what you're going to do with your time. You go crazy. You drive everyone around you crazy. You got to think about what purpose, passion, emotional reward might you miss by retiring. Are you going to miss the fact that you created something important and watch it turn into something special? Are you going to miss it that 6 people come up to you around and say, what are we going to do about this? Are they going to miss the fact that someone said, Asaf, what's your comment on that? Whatever it is, you got to be able to fill that void. It's a huge part of a business owner's satisfaction from being a business owner. So to exit on your own term, build a business that can be sold when you want to and to whom. That's an important part of it. And many of us aren't thinking that way along the process. And one of the things we do with our TAB members is make sure that they're building a business that is developing equity and is sellable. Get advice from other business owners. Are you putting yourself in a position that all you hear from is what your employees and yourself is telling yourself to do? Or do you put yourself in a position where you're getting outside advice from others so you don't have to make the same mistakes that they do? huge part of the research that he did. Give yourself enough time, not measured in months, but in years, to sell your business. Very important part of the process. And that, folks, is the last principle that I wanted to share with you. Now, Eric does have a book for everybody here. There's a form that he'd like you to fill in and get it. He'll talk about that. But in that book also is getting the right people on the right bus. Everyone knows what it means to have the wrong person in the right seat, right? How much pain that can be. But then again, you put that right person in that spot, how much that means to you. Run your business like a franchise. And what we mean by that is documenting your processes and systems. It'll help with your exit strategy, help with your onboarding. It really helps the value, so when a buyer comes in, they understand what it's worth, and they feel that it's not so dependent on you. Your business becomes exponentially less valuable the more it's dependent on each of you. Achieve balance between your work life and your personal life. Many folks come to TAB and say, I have perfect balance, all I do is work. But that's not the goal. That's not the goal. And there's many others. There's many others in the book. I think you'll really enjoy it. And if you do get it and read it, I'd love to send me an email, let me know what you think. I'm going to leave you with one thing. It's an African proverb. And I think it really sums up what we and how we believe TAB really helps. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Thank you very much, everybody. I enjoyed being
I want to thank Jason. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, for sharing the building. We are not going anywhere after this event and the next presentation. If anyone wants to ask some questions, we're here until the last one is going. We're going to be here and answer those questions. Some facts about TAB: more than 6,000 members in about 14 countries. והדבר, יש לנו בפולדר שקיבלתם, יש סטטיסטיקה על כמה אנחנו מצליחים, סטטיסטיקה מאוד מוכחת ומאוד בדוקה, תסתכלו, תראו, אבל בעיקרון אנשים מדווחים על עלייה במחירות, אנשים מדווחים על שיפור ביזמות בעבודה, טיפול יותר יעיל בעובדים. חלק מהדברים ששמעתם כרגע הם באמת מסקנות ששמענו מאנשים במהלך כל השנים. יש לנו בקשה מאוד מאוד חשובה. כשנסיים את ההרצאה, יש לכם טופס משוב בתוך הפולדר. We have this form in Hebrew and in English, so you can choose your favorite language. So please fill this form and give it to one of the people that will stand there. Probably know that and some helpers at the end of the presentation, and also claim your book once you're doing it. So thank you guys very much, and I want to introduce Yael, which has a very, very nice presentation. Just disconnect.
It's not part of the presentation. It's just my desktop. This is. Okay, I'm gonna use microphone because I have another lecture tomorrow, which I have to save my voice for. Hi everyone, Chag Sameach. It's not that I don't know how to tie the tie. Ami was concerned. It's just Purim, so I guess I'm the only one who's dressed up for the event. I'm going to talk about myself a little bit later. I just want to start with a weird question. Did it ever happen to you that you were in a conversation with someone, and in the middle of the conversation, while you were looking in his eyes, you had a feeling that you lost him, like he's not really listening anymore? Ever happened to you? Okay, let's ask other way.